I greet you with the greeting of St. Francis. May the Lord give you his peace. Amen. Amen. Today's saint is quite an important saint, St. Ignatius of Antioch. This is the very first generation. He was probably born somewhere around 30 AD, which would have made him around 3 years old when Jesus died and rose from the dead. And he becomes a bishop in Antioch, where St. Peter had established the church on his way to establish the church in Rome. So to this day, all the bishops, the patriarchs of Antioch, have the name Peter in their name because they are successors to St. Peter, not as Pope, but as the Bishop of Antioch. So in Arabic, the name Peter is Butros, so you'll hear the Cardinal Butros such and such. That's what it's all about. And we have 7 letters that he wrote. He was somewhere around 86 years old. He'd been a bishop in Antioch for around 40 years, and he's being taken to Rome to be martyred, to be fed to the beast in the Colosseum. And he wrote 7 letters, and we have copies of those. And just the other day, we had the feast day of St. John Henry Newman, who's November 1st will be declared a doctor of the church. Newman loved the writings of St. Ignatius, and he famously quoted that all of Catholic theology finds its roots in the letters of St. Ignatius of Antioch. And in these letters, which again are extremely early days, this is the era right after the New Testament, he's saying all sorts of things about the Pope and the bishops and the Eucharist is the true flesh of Jesus, and like all these like really Catholic things. He's talking about it. And in his letter, we find the first written example of the word Catholic being used to describe the church. And he doesn't introduce it as a new term. He just throws it out there as if we all know that the one church of Jesus is Catholic. So there we go. Beautiful. And his story is amazing. You know, he's an old man, and he goes to his death fearlessly. And he even tells them, like, don't try to save me. Like, I want to be martyred for Jesus, who was martyred for me. And he even uses Eucharistic imagery to describe his impending martyrdom. That is profound. He says that, you know, my body will be ground by the teeth of the lions. Okay, that's a little gruesome. Sorry, kids. Okay. Like wheat is ground into flour. And then that he will be burned and like a loaf of bread is baked in an oven. So that's using Eucharistic imagery to describe his martyrdom. How in the world? I mean, that's mystical and profound and deep. And this is like the earliest days of the church. There was already an understanding that the Eucharist was the sacrifice of Jesus. The Eucharist is, you know, how we celebrate the death and resurrection, and that we who are martyred will also become like a Eucharist. That's so incredibly beautiful and profound. And the story of his courage and his fearlessness going to his torture and martyrdom without fear, but like joyfully, it gives us pause to say, well, how in the world how was he like that? How was he so courageous and fearless? And my proposal would be this: for all of the martyrs who were courageous and fearless at their martyrdom, including today's St. Ignatius, it's because they had been courageous and fearless in their faith all along. You know, we hear stories of the moment of martyrdom, and those are very inspiring. And you imagine the people who are there seeing how different the Christians were. In some cases, they were singing hymns of praise to God as they were waiting for the wild beast to be released. And the pagan Romans were like, whoa, there's something different about this religion. You know, how are they living this way? And for all of that, inspiration from stories like that, the backstory on that would be that in their normal, everyday life, they were living great fidelity. And that's the secret to, like, what do they say? If you want to die well, live well, huh? And so there's something here, I believe, for us, if you would allow me to do a shameless plug. Brother Pius and I have this podcast, Franciscan Fridays from the Shrine. The one that came out this morning is about what I call the 5th joyful mystery of the Rosary. We call the bonus mysteries, and that is the hidden years in Nazareth. You know, you could almost see, if you don't like that idea, it's an extension of the fifth joyful mystery, okay? So the end of that, we heard that Jesus goes back to Nazareth and he's obedient to Mary and Joseph and he's growing in wisdom and stature. And the Bible doesn't give us any details of his almost 30 years living at home. And so we ask the question, why doesn't the Bible give us those details? And I think my favorite answer would be because there wasn't much to say. He was living his life. He was going to school. He was learning. He was doing chores. Mother Mary was cooking and cleaning and doing her motherly things. St. Joseph was in the carpenter shop and they were working, and Jesus probably was learning. And according to Brother Pius, his divine hands even got splinters. Okay, you know. And there's that sanctification of normal, ordinary daily life, or what we hear Jesus saying in the gospel here, nothing will be secret. Everything will be brought to the light, even things you say behind closed doors, etc. And so that idea gives us a hint of the importance of our daily lives. Things that's not exciting enough to write a story about. It's not going to be on the news or make it into some sort of movie, but that fidelity to daily ordinary things. You know, if you're a kid, that means school, it's chores, etc. If you're an adult, it might mean work or domestic things, cooking, cleaning, you know, the care that we give to our ordinary things. And it's that daily striving for fidelity that when the moment comes, we'll have the grace for great heroic moments, because we were already living ordinary moments heroically. And this is really the secret of the saints. So many saints. I mean, between September and October, we are just loaded with so many great saints. Tomorrow's going to be St. Luke. So hopefully you can come back, all right? If the world is still here tomorrow, okay? But even today, St. Ignatius of Antioch, a great saint, this incredible story of his heroic death, but then to understand, like whenever I meet older couples, a lot of times people come here for blessings on their wedding anniversaries, and I've met a number of couples like, this is our 50th wedding anniversary. I almost fall to the ground, like, how in the world are you still alive? You know, like, just like, the beauty of that, like long suffering, that daily. I meet priests who are like elderly, they've been at it for decades, and I'm just like, how did you do it? Like, how did you survive? You know, just that beautiful gift, that witness that is maybe so lacking. It's nothing that would be kind of getting clicks on Instagram or whatever, but it's really the real stuff of God's grace, that fidelity to normal, ordinary things. I remember hearing my parents telling us when we were kids, like, you know, how do you behave when nobody's watching? You know, like your attitudes, your behavior, because the reality is God is always watching. So hope, you know, a little touch of paranoia is probably healthy, right? You know, you're never actually alone. All right. God sees everything. He knows everything. So, it's a little bit like Santa Claus, huh? He knows when you're sleeping. Okay, anyways. But that gift and that grace to really live our faith, you know, especially in those moments where it's really, you know, not exciting. And in the midst of that, something incredibly beautiful and profound starts to happen. And however it's going to happen for each one of us when we finally get called home, even if it's potentially something like martyrdom, you know, there's that grace is there, huh? Because of that daily life, that sanctification of the ordinary daily things. And so we give thanks to the Lord for those graces as well. Amen.